A few weeks ago, I received a phone call from a colleague of mine in Jewish education. She had heard about some of the changes we were making in our congregational schools and some of the new initiatives we had implemented in the synagogue community. She wanted to know if I had a few minutes to talk. Before I could even answer her question, she clarified it. She told me she wasn't interested in hearing anything about changes that took a significant amount of time. She only wanted to hear about the quick, easy, successful changes we had made. I had a smile. It's not because I didn't know where she was coming from, and it's not because there aren't simple changes you can make that do make a difference. But if you want to make significant change, enduring change, and if you want to create a culture of change, it absolutely will require a process. It's hard work, and there are no shortcuts. I remember when I started at Temple Israel Center, a mentor said to me, it's going to take you between 5 and 6 years to change the culture of any institution. I thought, that's a long time. And do I really have the endurance to last that long, knowing all the challenges I was going to have to face along the way? And did the Temple Israel Center community even think that change was necessary? After all, if you walked down the halls of what was then the Temple Israel Center Religious School and you peeked inside the classrooms, you didn't necessarily see rooms set up like they were 10 or 15 years ago, with desks neatly aligned in rows. They did look more or less like traditional learning spaces. And more often than not, you saw the educators standing in front of the class lecturing to students as they diligently followed along in their textbooks and completed worksheets. Make no mistake about it. Learning was happening. But was this learning enough? That was the question. And what do we do if it's not? What do we do as educators? What do we do as communities? I remember, though, when I started, this is what my head felt like. I was completely overwhelmed. What kind of changes do I make? Where do I start? What is going to be effective? I felt like this. It's been 8 years since I've been at Temple Israel Center, and whereas there have been far too many moments of frustration and exhaustion to count, there have been many moments of triumph and joy that trump it all. There are many examples of the necessity to change in our tradition. Here's one text I'd like to share with you. God says to Moses, "Just as I give you the power to see the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, so shall you make it." Rashi's commentary on this is that this doesn't solely apply to Moses' generation, but rather to all future generations. And that if we're interested in creating a holy place, there's not just one design, but rather that design must conform to the vision of its time. What fascinates me about this text is that we're actually commanded to embrace change, not for the sake of change alone, but because time dictates that things will not stay the same. But that doesn't mean that change is easy, or that this is about change for the sake of change. The cost of change is too high for there not to be a compelling reason to change. In fact, that reason must be so compelling that it keeps all those involved focused and inspired through all the challenges that are inherent in every change process. Because change is hard, and it's not for those who are afraid to take risks and possibly fail. Change is also uncomfortable. Here's a simple exercise that we've done with our learners at Temple Israel Center that illustrates how even the smallest changes can feel. Cross your arms across your chest. You feel comfortable and confident. Look at their faces. They certainly feel comfortable. Now I want you to reverse your arms. How does it feel? Comfortable? Not so much. That's because it's not what you typically do. This is how change feels for most of us all of the time. In the book, The Human Side of School Change, Robert Evans points out the duality in our response to change. We both resist it and embrace it. Why? According to Evans, it's because life depends on continuity. We feel secure when things are stable, and therefore we're uncomfortable when there's a need to adapt. In my opinion, the most powerful reason not to change is because change is always accompanied by loss. That loss may be minimal or significant, but whenever there's innovation and change, there's always a sense of loss. Loss of what's familiar, loss of what we've always done and are comfortable with, loss of the thought that things would always remain the same. So given all this, why change? The first thing I want to say is that it's not because the current synagogue educational system is broken or ineffective. People are learning, but it needs to change because the world has changed, families have changed, and the way that people connect to Judaism has changed. Just look at families today. Parents and children are pulled in so many different directions. Ask any parent and you'll hear a litany of after-school activities and tutoring schedules, not to mention the amount of homework that children receive each and every night. So given this reality, we as educators have to take a good hard look at not only what we're teaching, but how we're teaching it, and whether this aligns with our goals and with how we know learners learn best. So where do we begin? How do we initiate change? Listening is a key component to any change process. Listening will inform your vision and will allow you to create a new holy place, a modern-day tabernacle with your community. We need to listen to what our learners want, what their interests are, and how they learn best. And I'm using learners here in its broadest sense, seniors and parents and teens and children, even your youngest learners. It's amazing what they will tell you when you ask them. Regarding parents, don't just ask parents what they want their children to know. Ask them what their hopes and dreams and wishes are. Did you ever notice in the word Jewish, if you put parentheses around the W and H, the word wish is in between? Ask them what their Jewish wishes are for their children. And then listen. I think you'll find, as we did at Temple Israel Center, that their hopes and wishes are very similar to our goals as educators. And if we want to help make those wishes come true, we need to change the way we're doing Jewish education. And that means that both the content and the structure needs to change. And by the way, when you ask parents what their Jewish wishes are for their children and their hopes, they don't tell you that they want their children to be doctors and lawyers, or they want their children to know how many sides a sukkah has according to halakha. You do hear, I want them to be proud about being Jewish. I want them to have a strong Jewish identity. I want them to carry on Jewish traditions. I want them to marry somebody Jewish. But you also hear just as passionately, I want them to be kind. I want them to make a difference in this world. I want them to be happy. So why not show them and teach in a way that Judaism can do all this and more? And what about those parents, or those adults rather, who don't have children? They have Jewish wishes too. Many are looking to connect to a community that will add a dimension to their lives, a holiness, if you will, and connect them to something bigger than themselves. That's the key. And so as educators, we need to ask ourselves, is Judaism something we teach for knowledge alone? Or is Judaism something we teach because we believe it will add meaning and value to someone's life? Since the latter is indeed the case, and if we believe, as the Talmud tells us, great is learning which inspired action, then we have to teach differently. At Temple Israel Center, this became the core value in our educational vision, learning that would lead to action, to living Jewishly. And so we realized we needed to engage not only the head, but the heart. We needed to involve the entire family and the community. We needed to create experiences, not programs. We needed to push learning outside the walls of the learning spaces in our building. And we needed to redefine who is the educator, the role of the learner, and who is the learner, and what success looks like. That was the key for us. So what did we do? We began to make really small changes. And slowly, as we became more comfortable with change, we started to make dramatic changes, significant changes. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't. There were many obstacles along the way, many we anticipated, and even more that we didn't. That's because change is a multidimensional process that affects every aspect of an organization, its structure, its politics, and especially its people. It took rabbis who saw themselves as true partners in the change process. And it took a congregation, one that I feel blessed to be a part of, that was willing to take risks. Not to mention a group of talented and dedicated educators who saw themselves as part of a team. All I can tell you is that it was worth it, because as Jews, we need to respond to the world in which we're living, and that world is changing. There's a clever saying by Rav Kook, which I believe captures the joys and challenges and the cycle of change. The old shall be new, and the new shall be sacred. This saying encompasses the belief that every generation of Jews needs to find an authentic way to express itself, grounded in the past, but dreaming of the future. Again, I want to emphasize that this does not imply the failure of existing synagogues and schools. It does, however, imply that there are challenges and struggles to engage the learner today in a time that is like nothing that has come before. And so the time to change is now. Just as God gave Moses the power to see the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, so too we are blessed with the ability to see that change is both necessary and possible. For all of us in this never-ending cycle of change, we do so with the understanding that our endeavor is to create a new holy place of exploration, discovery, and learning, one that conforms to the reality of our time. May we all have the strength, the courage, and the vision to do so. Thank you.
I once heard Philip Schlechty, the great educational reformer, say that what holds up educational improvement, what holds up change in the education field, is that there are too many people saying, yeah, but, and not enough people saying, what if?